Part 7. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Se Nian Bai. Chapter 61. Dogs are born to swim. Ever since Su Ming threw them into the water, De Fu and Wang Ke have fallen in love with Shuahun Lake. They don't care about playing with cats all day long. They just soak in Shuahun Lake whenever they want. Su Ming also specially made a set of small life jackets for them, so that they can cool off in the water and occasionally act as lifeguards. That morning, Wang Ke brought back a plastic bag of snacks from the water and shouted at several tourists rowing on the water. Su Ming then realized that some uncivilized tourists not only feed fish, but also throw things into the lake. If fish eat plastic bags, they will definitely die. Even if fish don't eat them, it is difficult to decompose naturally and accumulate at the bottom of the water. It is difficult to clean up after a long time, which will greatly pollute the water quality. Su Ming quickly asks Xiao Li to drive a motorboat to the lake for a tour. Fortunately, the wolf and dog brothers found it in time. There were not many pollutants such as plastic bags in the lake. Even so, more than a dozen were fished out. As a last resort, he could only put up signs along Shuahun Lake every few sections saying swimming is strictly prohibited, feeding fish is strictly prohibited, and then let the Wolfhound brothers patrol, and told Lao Zhutu and Master Peng to keep an eye on it and remind tourists not to litter. The plastic bag incident reminded Su Ming that Shuahun Lake is an open water area, and it is impossible to prevent outsiders from approaching. With people coming and going, it is inevitable that someone will throw things into the water. It is not enough to just remind tourists. He asked Goza to go back to the back mountain and bring back 5 large blue beehives filled with honey. With these tonics, Su Ming used his mental power to communicate with all the aquatic creatures in the lake and explain some important things, such as not being allowed to secretly swim back to the reservoir from the channel, and not being allowed to eat the garbage left by tourists. Tourists littering cannot be blamed entirely on the tourists themselves, and they are always raised to the level of quality and morality. There weren't many trash cans in the zoo, and even fewer near Shuahun Lake. There was often only one every few hundred meters. Tourists threw their trash into the lake, sometimes just for convenience. So Su Ming paid for dozens of simple trash cans out of his own pocket, spending more than 10,000 yuan to buy dozens of simple trash cans and place them in a row along Shuahun Lake. After doing these things, the 10 tons of sea fish and half a ton of ordinary feed that Su Ming bought finally arrived. Zhu Chenggui said last time that in order to ensure the freshness of the fish meat, try to feed less other fish feed. Feeding less does not mean not feeding. The half-ton of ordinary feed he bought is not the staple food of fish, but is mainly used to balance the nutrition of fish. It also has certain functions of purifying water quality and sterilizing. It is a very practical concentrated feed. Generally, fish farmers will mix and match it. Wang Ke and De Fu, who were about to go swimming to escape the summer heat, smelled the fishy smell on the truck from a distance and shouted at the truck. The mixed fish had been processed and cut into pieces and frozen. As soon as the car door was opened, a strong fishy smell hit Su Ming's nose, choking him and making him step back several steps. Send it to the warehouse. Su Ming quickly pulled up the shutter door behind the car, covered his nose and sat in the passenger seat, saying to the driver, "If so many mixed fish were piled up beside the Tingfen water pavilion, people would not be able to live in the pavilion. The smoke would kill people. Then it would be better to raise flies instead." The zoo has a large warehouse with a pool, cold storage, and even a small slaughterhouse. It usually stores animal food, but the zoo is short of funds, so more than half of this warehouse is vacant, which is a waste. It was empty anyway. Hearing that Su Ming was really going to raise fish, Director Song simply negotiated with Su Ming to rent part of the warehouse to him. Su Ming could put fish feed here. If there were fish for sale in the future, they could also be placed in the warehouse, but the premise was that it could not occupy the space of various goods in the zoo. Su Ming agreed without hesitation. Anyway, the warehouse was very large, and even if feed was added, it would not be full at all, and there was no problem of occupying the zoo's cargo space. The key was that the rent was too cheap. The zoo employees Laolin and Xiaolin who managed the warehouse were uncle and nephew, and they had a monthly salary of more than 2,000 yuan. Su Ming rented the warehouse. In addition to paying for the water and electricity, he gave them a subsidy of 1,500 yuan per person every month. In this way, the huge warehouse, with complete facilities, was equivalent to a rent of more than 30,000 yuan a year, and there were two old hands who knew each other well to help take care of it. You can't find such a cheap thing anywhere. The warehouse is the property of the zoo. With a word from Director Song, this bargain fell on Su Ming's head. It can be seen how important it is to have a good relationship with the supervisor. The zoo is also a beneficiary. Although most of the warehouse is empty, it would rather leave it vacant than rent it to outsiders. The warehouse is full of animal food. If something unexpected happens, it will be troublesome. Then wait for the dispute. Besides, it is not convenient for outsiders to come in and out. There is no such concern when renting it to Su Ming. On the surface, the zoo does not make money, but the uncle and nephew of Laolin and Xiaolin benefit. The salary of this uncle and nephew is the lowest among all the employees of the zoo, even lower than that of the new Su Ming. With the current price, more than 2,000 yuan a month is simply poverty. The uncle and nephew complained to Director Song every few days and begged for a raise, but the salary of each position is fixed, and Director Song cannot increase it at will. If he increases their salary, what will happen to others? Su Ming's renting is equivalent to helping Director Song solve this headache and effectively calming the emotions of the employees. Although 1 or 2,000 yuan may not be much, for people who earn a few thousand yuan a month, suddenly having an extra 1 or 2,000 yuan is definitely different and has a fundamental difference. If Su Ming hadn't appeared, they would have to rely on years of hard work to get a salary increase of 1 or 2,000 yuan. This refers to technical personnel. For people like the uncle and nephew of the Lin family, they may not get a salary increase of 2,000 yuan even if they work until retirement. First, Master Peng, Old Zhou, and Xiao Li, and now uncle and nephew Laolin and Xiaolin, have benefited from Su Ming's relationship and their income has increased a lot. The work enthusiasm of all the employees in the zoo has also increased a lot, and everyone feels hopeful. So when Laolin saw Su Ming coming, he was even more affectionate than when he saw Director Song. He called Xiaolin to help him move all the feed into the warehouse. "Brother Su, sit down, we can move it." Xiaolin made a cup of tea for Su Ming, then came up and asked with a smile, "Brother Su, well, do you need help to feed the fish?" "Feeding fish?" When Su Ming heard these two words and looked at the pile of feed, an idea suddenly struck him, as if he had thought of something. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 62. Of course, feeding fish requires manpower. There are hundreds of acres of lake surface and hundreds of thousands of fish fry, which need to be fed every day. Even if there is an automatic fish feeder, people are needed to put in the feed regularly and operate it. But Su Ming is not willing to hire people to feed the fish now. Contracting the Shuahun Lake, after all, is to make money, not charity. Under the condition of mutual benefit, he is willing to make some contributions to the zoo, and even sacrifice some small interests. But marine fish are really not cheap. In order to raise good fish, they have to buy them, which is a big investment in itself. Now the fish in the lake have not yet made any profit, and hiring a few people to feed the fish is too expensive. Su Ming has been thinking about this problem. Various fish can grow up by eating black fish poop. Black fish eat marine fish, which saves money on other feeds, but black fish itself is quite gluttonous. A big black fish weighing several kilograms will eat nearly 1 kilogram of food a day. With this calculation, the money spent on buying marine fish in a fishing season is scary. Su Ming is not the only one who does mixed breeding. Most of the farmers adopt mixed breeding, and each has its own way. If Su Ming had not learned the trick of blackfish from Zhu Qinggui, he would not have had any technical advantages if he only mixed the 4 major carps. Therefore, it is necessary to buy and feed the miscellaneous fish. Fish farming is generally not a highly profitable industry. The investment in fry and feed alone will occupy a large part, not to mention the factors of natural disasters, man-made disasters, and market fluctuations. If the luck is bad, the farmers will not only not make money after a year of hard work, but also lose money. After all, there are only a few companies like Huading Fishery Company. They occupy reservoirs with good water quality, are basically not troubled by natural disasters, have a powerful background, and are not afraid of man-made disasters and market fluctuations. They are basically guaranteed to make money. Hearing Xiao Lin mention this, and thinking of the garbage incident in the Water Army Lake before, Su Ming suddenly thought of a way, but he didn't know if it would work. He bought a few kilograms of lychees and brought them to Sister Tong's office. Sister Tong was playing landlord online. When she heard the knock on the door, she called out, "Come in," without even looking up. "Oh, it's Xiao Su." Seeing that it was Su Ming, Sister Tong quickly sold the 4 twos in her hand and crossed the finish line successfully. Then she clicked the exit game button, stood up and welcomed Su Ming in. Seeing the lychees in his hand, Sister Tong laughed and said, "Come on, why are you being so polite?" "Hey, it's not a good thing." Su Ming smiled, put the lychees on the table, sat down, and asked, "Sister Tong, last time you told me that your niece is the nurse Xiao Hu from our zoo clinic. Is she busy recently?" Sister Tong was obviously stunned for a moment. "Ah, Xiao Hu, you, looking for her?" The zoo has a small clinic with a doctor and 3 nurses, which mainly caters to various animals. To put it bluntly, it is a veterinary clinic. However, it is also open to humans. It is not possible to see a doctor. Occasionally, if someone catches a cold or has a fever, they can go to the health center to get some medicine. The price is much cheaper than that in a regular hospital. It is a small benefit that the zoo gives to internal employees. There are many relatives in the zoo. Nurse Xiao Hu is from Sister Tong's hometown. She is still a distant relative of Sister Tong. She has to call Sister Tong cousin. Sister Tong is a kind-hearted person. After Su Ming first contracted the cruise business of Shuixi, Sister Tong knew that Su Ming was still single, so she tried to match Su Ming and Nurse Xiao Hu. However, Su Ming had no intention of doing so. Sister Tong mentioned it several times, but Su Ming just brushed it off. Later, in just 1 month, Su Ming first made more than 3 million yuan from the auction, and then the scale of the business also expanded a lot. Sister Tong did not mention this topic anymore. It is a very simple truth. If Su Ming came from the mountains before, his family conditions were poor, and he was a temporary worker, he would be barely a match for Xiao Hu. Strictly speaking, he was still climbing up to Nurse Xiao Hu. But now the situation is completely reversed. Su Ming has transformed himself into a young and wealthy boss. He is also very handsome. It seems that he has some feelings for the beautiful female reporter from the TV station. He definitely doesn't like her niece. So when Su Ming took the initiative to mention Nurse Xiao Hu, Sister Tong was very surprised. She thought, could it be that Xiao Su likes girls who are rough, can manage the family, and are good at giving birth? "My elder sister, that's not what I mean," Su Ming hurriedly explained to Sister Tong, and Sister Tong finally understood. She called the medical clinic, and soon Nurse Xiao Hu came. Nurse Xiao Hu is tall. Her height of nearly 1.7 meters is definitely outstanding among girls, but proportional to her height is her bucket-like waist. The loose nurse uniform is like a tights on her body, which is tight and highlights the small fat on her belly like Michelin tires. Her face is still healthy and rosy. Anyone who sees Nurse Xiao Hu for the first time will agree with Sister Tong's opinion. She is a good girl with big hands and feet, who can manage the household and give birth. Hey, brother Su is here too. As soon as Nurse Xiaohu entered the room, she greeted Su Ming in a loud voice, and seemed to want to come over and pat his shoulder. Hey, hello, sit down. Su Ming quickly shrank back. His small body was not big enough for her to slap him. If she slapped him, he would lie there on the spot, and he would lose face. Sister Tong glared at Xiaohu. Don't be disrespectful, sit down, Xiao Su will take care of you. Ah! What a good thing. Brother Su, tell me, I'm listening. Xiaohu sat down on the chair and casually pulled a lychee, peeled it open and threw it into his mouth. It's like this. Your health center usually has nothing to do. I happen to have a small business there, but there is no manpower. In the afternoon of that day, Nurse Xiaohu took 2 other nurses and carried several large buckets and walked towards Shuahun Lake. The other 2 little nurses were so thin and frail that it was a bit difficult for each of them to carry a small bucket. They had to carry it with both hands and move step by step towards the lake. Xiaohu simply found a pole, carried a big bucket on one end, and walked like a tiger. Here we come. Master Peng had already received the notification from Su Ming. When he saw Nurse Xiaohu and the others, he said hello with a smile. Here you come. You're always busy. Xiao Huzao responded in a loud voice, and then took 2 nurses and lifted the bucket to the lake shore next to the cruise ship dock. He picked up a big wooden sign covering the bucket, slammed it into the soil, and then he casually dug out half a red brick from the ground, banged it on the top of the sign a few times, and nailed the sign deeply into the soil. There are 2 lines of large characters written on the sign. First row, fish feed for sale, 5 yuan a bag. Second row, bottle feeding fish, 10 yuan a bottle. After inserting the sign, she unhooked 3 small folding benches from the poles, sat on one, and said to the other 2 nurses, sit down. Sister Hu, do you think someone can come and buy it? A little nurse looked around a little embarrassed and asked Nurse Hu. You act like thieves. Of course no one will buy you. You're selling things. How can you do it without shouting? It's up to me. Xiaohu piled up his sleeves, magically pulled out a big speaker, and shouted at the speaker. They sell fish feed. Fish feed is fragrant and sweet. Buy a bag of fish feed, feed the fish and row the boat at the same time. You can exercise and watch fish at the same time. You kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 63. When Nurse Xiaohu shouted so loudly, the other 2 nurses blushed with shyness. One of the younger nurses hit Xiaohu. Why are you shouting so loudly? It's so embarrassing. You 2 are so delicate. How can you sell things without shouting? Learn from me. Nurse Xiaohu glared at them and continued to shout at the loudspeaker. Selling fish feed, fragrant and sweet fish feed. 5 yuan a bag, you won't lose money, you won't be fooled. Buy a bag of fish feed, and change a good mood for the day. There were some people preparing to row boats at the cruise ship dock, and some were walking along the lake. When she shouted, she immediately attracted a lot of people's attention. People like to watch the fun, and with 3 girls in nurse uniforms sitting in a row by the lake, many tourists gathered around curiously. Didn't you say you don't feed the fish? Someone asked. Nurse Xiaohu said carelessly, that's not feeding randomly. What are you feeding? Plastic bags, junk food, the fish are all dead. Ours is real sea fish, mixed with concentrated feed, the fish grow big and healthy after eating it, how can it be the same? The tourists are not stupid, someone immediately reacted and said with a smile, okay, your zoo wants us to help you feed the fish, and you want us to pay. Everyone takes what they need. Everyone comes here to play, isn't it just for fun? Who can't afford to spend a few dollars? Don't you think this is the truth? Nurse Xiaohu said. She is right. For swimming, feeding fish is work rather than entertainment. For tourists, it is just the opposite. Sprinkling feed into the water and attracting a large group of fish to compete for food is entertainment, not work. Everyone calculates their own accounts, starting from different points, and calculating differently. For tourists, spending a few dollars to buy fun is natural. Suming was not the first to use this method. Now many farmhouses have launched projects of picking by yourself or even planting by yourself. Customers pick and plant by themselves, which is equivalent to saving the trouble of farmers and paying farmers money instead. That's the reason, spend money to buy happiness. There is a famous strawberry garden in the suburbs of Yangchuan City. Every year during the strawberry harvest season, a large number of tourists rush to pick strawberries and experience the pleasure of working by themselves. The strawberry farmers there save the cost of picking, transportation, and packaging, and the price of strawberries is higher than that on the market, which not only drives the economic development of the farmers in that area, but also gives city dwellers an opportunity to get close to nature, killing two birds with one stone. Nurse Xiaohu is eloquent and sold half a bucket of fish feed in a short time. People who bought fish feed took the feed on the boat and threw it on the lake. They didn't expect there would be many fish in the lake, but they didn't expect that after the feed was thrown into the water surface suddenly boiled, and countless fish squeezed one by one and emerged to compete for it. Su Ming deliberately starved the fry for several days. When they finally encountered food, they ate it desperately. For a while, the lake was full of fish swarming, and large patches of water splashed. The scene was quite spectacular. The whole Shuahun Lake seemed to have suddenly come alive. Most of these feeds were fragments of marine fish. Domestic fish would not eat them. They would sink to the bottom of the water and be eaten by blackfish. The four major carps mainly ate the small amount of granular concentrated feed mixed in. "Girl, what do you mean by feeding fish with a milk bottle?" An old lady with her grandson pointed at the sign of Nurse Xiaohu and asked in confusion. Nurse Xiaohu took out a milk bottle from the bucket. It was called a milk bottle, but it was actually an empty mineral water bottle, but with a rubber nipple installed. The bottle was filled with concentrated feed and chopped marine fish. Several large notches were cut on the nipple, and a small bamboo pole about 1 meter long was tied behind it. "Look, that's it." Nurse Xiaohu walked to the river with a bamboo pole and held the bottle filled with feed to the surface of the water. The feed leaked out of the broken nipple and fell into the water, attracting the fish under the water to pop up and rush to the bottle. One by one, they had round fish mouths and rushed to suck the feed in the nipple. Beiji, beiji, the little fishes scrambled for the nipple to eat, looking like a group of children sucking milk. Since most of the milk bottles were marine fish, only a small amount of concentrated feed was mixed in, so if those domestic fish wanted to eat the concentrated feed, they had to suck hard to suck the small pieces of marine fish out of the nipple. In this way, the fragments of marine fish would also sink to the bottom of the water and be eaten by blackfish. "Grandma, Grandma, I want to play, I want to play." The little grandson slapped himself happily and pulled the ant's sleeve to act coquettishly. Okay, girl, how much is it for one play?" the ant asked. Nurse Xiaohu handed over a bottle and said, 10 yuan a bottle, no time limit. A bag of mixed feed costs 5 yuan, and there is only about as much feed in the bottle, but the price has doubled. Time is even less important. A bottle of feed is less than 1 pound at most, and it will be eaten up by fish in a short time. With the first person paying, the others followed. Those who came to the zoo were either young people or brought their children, and there were also many couples. The more than 20 bottles prepared by Nurse Xiaohu were all sold out in less than an hour. A row of big and small children squatted on the lake embankment, and stretched the bamboo poles tied with milk bottles into the water to attract fish to eat, which was a happy scene. Su Ming stood at the top of the Tingfeng Pavilion, taking in the view of Shuahun Lake and most of the zoo. Seeing the little Hu nurse shouting hard below, he couldn't help laughing. He really didn't find the wrong person. Little Hu's personality was too suitable for this job. When selling feed, the effect was better than he expected. Not only could she shout, but she also came up with the idea of using a milk bottle. He and the 3 nurses from the health center agreed that when the 3 nurses were not on duty, they would take turns to sell fish feed here on the cruise ship, and use the money from selling feed to make up for the deficit of buying feed. Even if they bought the best marine fish and concentrated feed, 1 ton plus freight would only cost 2,000 yuan, an average of 1 yuan per caddy. He wholesaled it to little Hu nurses at a price of 4 yuan per caddy. They could take the goods first and pay later, and settle accounts once a week. It was basically impossible to lose money. The profit was theirs. So as long as he could sell 25% of the feed, he could get back all his capital, and the income and expenditure would be balanced, which was equivalent to raising fish without spending money. Su Ming was careful. The profit of 1 yuan per pound was not much, but the total amount was large. If a certain amount was sold, Nurse Xiaohu and her colleagues would have to take out a part of the profit and invest it in the medical clinic to buy some common medicines and give them to sick employees in the zoo for free. In this way, if the sales of feed increased in the future, the entire zoo would share the benefits and would not arouse envy. Of course, it was too early to talk about making a lot of money now. Su Ming observed for a while and found that there were quite a few tourists who bought feed to feed the fish. The 3 large buckets of feed that Xiaohu and her colleagues brought were sold out in less than 2 hours. He suddenly realized that, including the free fish fry, if everything went well, the 100 acres of fish would be almost all free money after they grew up. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 64. By 4:30 in the afternoon, the zoo hadn't closed yet, but the feed that Nurse Xiaohu brought had been sold out. She took her stuff back to the clinic to settle the bill, and sent Nurse De Liao and Nurse Xiao Liao to find Su Ming to order tomorrow's goods, preparing to order another 200 kilograms. Su Ming was a little surprised. They went to sell feed in the afternoon today. In fact, they only worked for 2 hours, sold 130 kilograms of feed, and made more than 200 yuan. Moreover, today was the first day of opening. In the future, more and more people will buy feed as the news spreads. According to this calculation, 8 hours a day, tomorrow should be able to order 400 to 500 kilograms. After asking, I found out that the 3 of them had to go to the clinic to be on duty, so they couldn't be by the lake all day, so they could only come to work for 3 or 4 hours a day, and they had to take turns with each other. Su Ming nodded. It seems that selling feed is a feasible way, but it is not enough to rely on these 3 nurses alone. Why are you two so nervous? With such an introverted personality, it doesn't matter if you can't do business well, how can you fall in love and get married in the future? After asking the main question, Su Ming chatted and laughed. Nurse Liao and Nurse Liao are cousins. They came to work in the zoo directly after graduating from junior college. They have been working in the medical clinic for only half a year. They have not come into contact with many people, but they have come into contact with many animals. They are relatively introverted. They sat behind the wrangler and followed Su Ming to the warehouse to pick up goods. They lowered their heads all the way. Su Ming asked a question and they answered it. They didn't dare to say anything extra, and they looked nervous. It would be better if they didn't say this. When Su Ming talked about falling in love and getting married, the lively energy that the nurse sisters finally showed up disappeared in an instant. They buried their heads in their chests at the same time, and their ears were red. Su Ming shook his head helplessly. The sisters were notoriously dull. They blushed when talking to gay men, which made the young people in the zoo embarrassed to go to the medical clinic, for fear of being regarded as bad guys. Fortunately, The wolf-dog brothers were also in the car. The big and small Liaos were not good at dealing with people, but they were quite close to animals. They each held a big dog in their arms, looking at its tongue and tickling it, and served the wolf-dog brothers so comfortably that they kept wagging their tails. A guy who forgets his friends for the sake of beauty. Are you two brothers going to marry sisters? Su Ming sent a very contemptuous message through his mental power. The nurse Xiao Liao in the back seat suddenly exclaimed, "Ouch!" Su Ming thought he was bitten by a dog, so he quickly braked and looked back. The silent sisters lowered their heads even lower. Their faces were the color of boiled crabs, and they were like two quails, huddled together and trembling, looking like they were about to cry, and they didn't dare to look at Su Ming at all. The wolf-dog brothers were rubbing against the sisters, and they even had a long tongue to lick their faces. When he looked closely, even Su Ming's face flushed. After being hugged and touched by the nurse sisters, the wolf-dog brother actually got hard shamelessly, and with that thing sticking out, he pushed it against the sisters' waists. Seeing this scene, Su Ming was so embarrassed that he wanted to dig a big hole to bury the two stinky hooligans first, and then bury himself. Get out, stinky hooligans. This time, he didn't need mental power. Su Ming slapped the wolf-dog brother twice, making him howl, and rushed out of the back seat of the Wrangler. The two guys didn't know what shame was. After getting off the car, they actually stood up, put their front paws on the car door, and swung their tails to stick out their tongues at the nurse sisters. Their expressions were quite lewd, and the word wolf was almost engraved on their faces. Go away by yourself. Su Ming stepped on the accelerator and restarted the Wrangler. The atmosphere became even more awkward along the way. The nurses blushed and lowered their heads without saying a word. Su Ming couldn't bring up what happened just now. He pretended to look at the scenery while driving. Fortunately, the warehouse was not far away. It didn't take long to drive there. Su Ming asked Lao Lin and Xiao Lin in the warehouse to open the door and weighed 200 kilograms of feed from the freezer. Thank you, Brother Su. Nurse Xiao Liao managed to utter a word with great difficulty. Her expression was tangled as if her life was about to be taken. After that, there was no conversation. The wolf-dog brothers hung out for a long time and returned to the waterside pavilion at around 8 o'clock in the evening. Speaking of which, it is the nature of animals to be in heat. Even humans are also impulsive, but humans know how to control it. In other words, humans know how to pretend. Education is necessary. Su Ming said seriously, love knows no age, gender, or nationality, but it doesn't know no race. No matter how cute you two are, the nurse sister can't let you two climb into bed and be horny to her. You have chosen the wrong person. It's a pure waste of energy and feelings. The wolf-dog brothers didn't know if they understood or not. They squatted side by side and looked at Su Ming blankly. A few cats lay in the nest, looking at the wolf-dog brothers with contempt. Speaking of which, the wolf-dog brothers are also unlucky. They used to live by the reservoir and occasionally encountered a few wild dogs to solve their personal problems. Now they live in the zoo. Although their living conditions have greatly improved, they have completely stopped thinking about this. There are all kinds of animals in the zoo, but there are no dogs. No matter how brave the wolf-dog brothers are, they dare not have the idea of tiger, lion, crocodile, or bear. Even if they have this intention, they don't have the ability. How about sterilizing you two? To save trouble, Su Ming scratched his head and asked tentatively. The wolf-dog brothers probably understood what had happened now. They let out a miserable howl, curled their tails between their legs, clamped their hind legs tightly together, and shook their heads desperately. Why are you so excited? It's just talk, no humor at all. The week passed quickly. On the weekend, Nurse Xiao Hu came to settle the bill for the feed with Su Ming. In fact, it didn't last a whole week, just over 4 days in total. The three people took turns to spend 2 hours every day selling feed, and sold nearly 1,000 kilograms of mixed feed. Xiaohu doesn't look very good, but she is really a thoughtful person. According to her observations, the reason why the feed business is so good is that there are so many fish in Shuahun Lake. Every time you sprinkle a handful of feed, it will attract a lot of fish. The fight for fish is quite spectacular. In addition, there are also many kinds of fish. Unlike ordinary parks where there are only koi fish, people are tired of aesthetics. If they can only see one kind of fish, they will lose interest after a long time. What Suming got from Huading Reservoir were mainly the 4 major species of fish, as well as 7 or 8 other species of fish, and even some fish that were not very common but were not very economically beneficial. My dear, it's so easy to make money, Nurse Xiaohu slapped a wad of banknotes in her hand. The total amount of money is not much. After most of the week, the profit of the 3 nurses is just over 1,300 yuan. On average, each of the 3 nurses can get between 400 and less than 500 yuan, which is close to 2,000 yuan a month. But just like the actual situation of all employees in the zoo, the nurses don't have many things to do, their salaries are not high, and they don't have much extra money to earn. This extra 2,000 yuan a month is a purely cost-free business, and they make money in vain. After paying the bill to Nurse Xiaohu, it was already past 10 o'clock in the evening. Su Ming went to Shuahun Lake alone to test the results of this week on the spot. The feed is basically pollution-free. Almost all the trash fish in the sea are eaten by the snakehead fish. The shrimps, soldiers, and crabs in the water also get some benefits. In the mud at the bottom of the lake, there are signs of black fish swimming everywhere. From time to time, a group of black things will emerge from the mud, like a large group of water plants nested together, slowly floating up to the surface of the water. Of course, this is not an aquatic plant, but a snakehead fish's daddy. Before the blackfish daddy is completely dispersed in the water, various domestic fish will immediately come around and smell the smell. They will open their mouths and suck fiercely at the blackfish daddy floating in the water. There are too many snakehead fish. If you stand under the water and look at it at this time, the bottom of the water is like an active volcano. Baba are constantly spraying out from everywhere, and then a large group of fish will be used immediately. Su Ming scratched his head, not sure whether the scene should be described as spectacular or breathtaking. In fact, although snake-headed fish daddy is excrement, it is not as dirty as imagined. On the contrary, after a round of purification of the snake-headed fish's gastrointestinal tract, some unhygienic things in the original feed that may cause pollution, or bacteria, etc., will also become dirty. It is decomposed, absorbed, and killed, so snakehead fish daddy is definitely more hygienic and nutritious than most things eaten by wild fish. All in all, in just 1 week, the ecological chain of Shuahun Lake has basically been formed. If you observe carefully, the sizes of various fish fry have also grown. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 65. Su Ming deliberately used his mental power to catch a few crucian carp, and found that the growth rate of the fish was somewhat higher than expected, or in other words, faster than common sense. Crucian carp is the slowest in growth among the 4 domestic fishes. Artificially bred crucian carp can be marketed at more than half a catty, and 1 catty is considered large. If it is purely wild crucian carp, 1 pound is relatively rare. Shuahun Lake is now connected to Huading Reservoir. The water quality on both sides is similar. It may be artificially cultured, but the fish quality is not much different from wild fish. This is one of the reasons why the fish from Huading Reservoir is so popular. Within a week, these crucian carp fry, which were originally only about 2 taels, now average 2 to 5. Fish grow faster when they are young and slower as they get older. For example, if a small crucian carp weighing 2 ounces eats well and has a good rest, it can gain 1 ounce of meat in a month, but a crucian carp weighing 1 pound may not gain 1 ounce of meat in half a year. Even so, the growth rate of the fish in Shuahun Lake is a bit scary. At this rate, crucian carp will almost generally weigh more than half a catty within half a year at most, and all major fish species will be ready for sale on the table. Su Ming estimated there were several reasons. First, snakehead cake is indeed a sacred food for fishes. If they eat well, they will grow well. Secondly, the water quality of Shuahun Lake has been greatly improved, and various fish, including shrimps, soldiers, crabs, loaches, eels, etc., have formed in it. A good ecosystem means a good living environment. In addition, the contribution of friends of animals should also be indispensable. Snapping turtles, bees, cats, and dogs, all those who come into contact with animal friends will undergo some positive evolution. The fish in Shuahun Lake have been baptized by Su Ming's spiritual power. Of course, they are also different from ordinary ones. The fish are different. Speaking of evolution, the fastest evolution in the lake during this period is the big-head catfish. The size of this guy is close to 1.5 feet. Although it is not that big among catfish, compared with its original small body of less than half a foot, it is already a giant at this time. Compared with other fish, the big-headed catfish not only eats well and lives well, but also has an advantage that other fish cannot match. It has been with Su Ming for the longest time, and it is the highest in the lake in terms of favorability and intelligence. And of course he became the steward of the lake. Under the nourishment of power, the big meat catfish grew fatter and fatter. Su Ming squatted by the lake, stretched out a finger, nodded the ball-sized head of the big-headed catfish, and said with a smile, "Be careful, don't get caught and stewed into a fish head hot pot." The big-head catfish didn't care. In Shuahun Lake, it could mobilize a large group of followers at any time. As long as Su Ming didn't eat the fish head hot pot, it was absolutely safe. After finding out the growth of fish in Shuahun Lake, Su Ming decided to further increase the amount of food he fed. After all, the little nurses have limited time and can only spare half a day during the working day. They can sell 2 tons of feed a month to make ends meet. This feed is not enough to feed 100 acres of fish. Anyway, the zoo has plenty of manpower, so Su Ming simply asked Master Peng, Lao Zhutu, and Xiao Li to join the feed sales team. Their 3 shifts, plus 3 nurses' shifts, can basically guarantee that there will always be visitors during the zoo's opening hours. You can buy feed and there is no problem of stalling. After experimenting with this method for another week, Su Ming was surprised to find that not only did he make back the money he paid for the goods, he also made some profit. It seems that I can make a net profit of more than 40 cents for every kilogram of feed. Even if the fish grow bigger in the future and it is not enough to just rely on tourists to feed the fish, I can also use the money I earn to hire people to feed the fish. After settling the accounts, Su Ming was in a good mood. He took a milk bottle and squatted by the lake with a group of children to feed the fish. Seeing the innocent smile on the child's face, Su Ming felt a little embarrassed and thought, "Am I too evil-minded? It doesn't matter whether you are a black heart or a red heart. What is important is that everyone is happy, no matter the fish in Shuahun Lake, the zoo employees, or the tourists." But in fact, the Dharma for both safety and security in the world will not fail the Tathagata or your Majesty. If someone is happy, someone must be unhappy. Boss Joe of Huading Fishing Company has been very unhappy recently. About a week ago, Joe Jin felt that something was wrong. After feeding for several days, not a few fry showed up. Joe Jin initially thought it was because of the weather. The fish didn't open their mouths and he didn't take it too seriously. But a few days later, after the weather improved, the situation remained the same. Every time we put in several boats of feed, there was still no movement in the lake. Joe Jin has been raising fish for more than a year or 2. He is extremely experienced in this field and he immediately noticed something was wrong. Even an abandoned wild pond would not be so lifeless. This is just like people. When a person is in a bad mood, he or she will eat less at most, and it is impossible not to eat all the time. If you don't eat all the time, it's not called being in a bad mood, it's called committing suicide. Of course the fish won't commit suicide. He thought there was some kind of fish disease that caused fish in a large area not to eat, so he quickly sent Baldhead to lead people to fish out a batch of fry for inspection. As a result, Baldhead cast several nets in succession and only caught 2 or 3 small fish and shrimps. Jojin looked at the empty fishing nets, his heart skipped a beat, and a chill ran down his spine. He hurriedly jumped on a boat with a trawl, sailed the boat himself, and took a spin in the lake. The tugboat was large and powerful, and the trawl net behind it was strong enough. However, the final result was no different from before. All the fish under the water seemed to have disappeared overnight. How many times have I told you to look at the fish, look at the fish? Tell me, where is the fish? Jojin looked at the empty fishing net, with veins popping out on his forehead. He kicked the bald man over, grabbed his collar, and shouted in a distorted voice. The bald man opened his eyes wide and stammered, "Brother Joe, we have been living by the lake, patrolling every day, there is no way anyone is stealing fish." "Then tell me, where is the fish? It has wings and can fly. Are they those water birds?" The bald man's eyes lit up when he heard the word wings, and he looked at the bushes on the shore tactfully. "He has been staying here all this time. Although he sleeps most of the time and can't be said to be fulfilling his duties, there are so many fish fry in the lake. It's okay to leave a few or dozens of them. How could someone be under their noses? All the fry were stolen from below. You. Even if there are 1,000 times more waterfowl, they won't be able to eat that many fish." Jojin pointed at the lake angrily, Go into the water and look for me." The bald man and a few boys went down to the lake with diving equipment and wandered around the water where the fish fry were stocked. They finally determined a fact that made Jojin even twitch: the fish fry were indeed gone. "Brother Joe, there are several big holes under the fishing net over there. The fish must have escaped through that hole." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 66. What? The fishing net is broken. Impossible. When Jojin heard the bald man say that the fishing net was broken, his first reaction was that it was impossible. He is a professional fish farmer, so of course he knows how important the fishing net is to trap the fry. If the fishing net is broken, he will only make a shitty profit and only lose money. He has been farming in Huading Lake for many years and knows the conditions of the reservoir. There will be some shrimps and crabs in the water, and occasionally big fish will come to eat them. Therefore, before putting the fry in, he spent a lot of money and effort, and the ones he bought were all high-end. Waiting for the fishing net. Even though the lines of the fishing net are not thick, they are extremely tough and intertwined in layers. Generally, as soon as fish and shrimps get close to the fishing net, they will be entangled and unable to escape. In the end, they can only be trapped in the fishing net. According to the quality of the fishing net he bought, let alone ordinary fish and shrimps, even if a small alligator comes, it will not be able to break through the fishing net, and in the end it will probably be entangled and left to die. Brother Joe, can I tell lies with my eyes open? Just go down and see for yourself and you will know, said the bald man. Let me go take a look. Jojin put on his diving suit without saying a word, plunged into the lake, and swam in the direction pointed by the bald man. After more than 10 minutes, there were ripples on the water, and Jojin's head popped up. He quickly swam back to the shore, strode ashore, took off his helmet, and revealed a face that was even colder than the lake. The bald man did not lie. There were 5 large holes under the water on one side of the fishing net. Each hole was about the same size as a footbath. With such a large hole, not to mention fry, even adult fish could easily escape. Judging from the water marks on the damaged edges of the holes, these holes have probably existed for at least 7 or 8 days. Such a long time is enough for all the fry to run away. Jojin is usually gloomy and rarely smiles, but the bald man has been following him for several years, but he has never seen his face look as ugly as it does now. The bald man looked a little scared, swallowed his saliva, and bravely said, "Brother Joe." "Shut up." Jojin's eyes were almost on fire, but his tone was as cold as ice. He gritted his teeth and asked the bald man word by word, "Aren't you staying here all day? The fishing net had such a big hole, you didn't know. It couldn't have been done by a human, right? Maybe it was some ferocious big fish." The bald man couldn't figure it out. The position of the fishing net was dozens of meters away from the shore, and it was deep. The fishing net itself was also very strong. If it was man-made, then the other party would either row a boat above the fishing net, or wear a diving suit, and you also need to be equipped with tools, and it is absolutely impossible to do it under their noses. If there was only one hole, it would make sense. But there are 5 holes, each hole is about the same size, lined up in a row. Are you telling me that these are made of fish? Are those fish turned into spirits? Not only that, Jojin carefully checked around the big hole and found that there were no remaining fish scales on the surrounding fishing nets. If a big fish broke through the net, it would be impossible to leave no trace at all. Besides, if a big fish really hits or bites the net, it will definitely cause a lot of noise. Only people can quietly break the fishing net. Hearing what Jojin said, the bald man muttered, "It's hard to say, those wasps last time." Jojin slapped him in the face, causing the bald man to stagger, and said angrily, "How dare you mention such nonsense to me? How many times have I told you to keep an eye on the fish? I will give you money to vent your anger." "You, that's good, you've been talking nonsense all day, my over 1 million fish fry were stolen under your nose, what do you say?" After being slapped by Jojin, the bald man's mind seemed to be enlightened. His eyes lit up and he said a little doubtfully, "No, Brother Joe, I suddenly remembered. I heard that fish farming has also begun in the Shuahun Lake in the zoo. Is there such a thing? Go and find out what kind of fish the zoo has and how many fish it has," Jojin said. The matter of fish farming in Shuahun Lake is not a secret at all. It is easy to find out. A gangster interrupted and said, "There are posts on the Yangchuan forum from tourists who go to the zoo to feed fish, and there are photos. I see that there are so many fish in the photos, and it's not big." At that time, I was still thinking, isn't this trying to steal business from us, and I need to teach you a lesson. Take me to see it. The group returned to the villa by the lake, went online, opened the forum, and found the post. Jojin's eyes are so poisonous. He can tell at a glance that the fish in the photo are all fry. The young man who once came to him to ask for advice on how to raise fish is standing by the lake with 2 wolf dogs, smiling and feeding the fish. "Damn it, aren't these Dehe and Urhe?" Bald Head pointed at the 2 wolf dogs and yelled. Jojin looked at the time of posting with a sullen face, and calculated that it happened to be shortly after he released the fry. All the signs are too coincidental. "Brother Joe, that boy named Su Ming must be the one causing the trouble. I'll take 2 people to get him," the bald head suddenly shouted. After all, Jojin is an old gangster and has seen a lot of the world. After experiencing the initial rage, he quickly calmed down, frowned and considered for a moment, and said, "There are 2 things now. You lead people go and do it. First, the reservoir fishery cannot be left empty. Order a batch of fish fry immediately. If you hurry up, you can still catch up with the season. Second, go get the number of the boy named Su Na and I will give him a call." Talk about it." The bald man was stunned, and then said, "Brother Joe, if you want me to tell you, just call the police. Isn't the deputy director of the police station familiar with you?" Put him in the station. How to deal with him then is up to you. Just say hello. Where is the evidence? How can the police station arrest the zoo's people if we don't have solid evidence? Jojin snorted with a gloomy face. Stealing my fish is not such an easy thing. I will talk to him and make him spit out everything he should spit out. If he doesn't know what's good for him, I will naturally have other ways. The bald man brought a few people to the zoo that afternoon, with a fierce momentum. This group of people all had short flat heads, dragons and phoenixes tattooed on their bodies, and looked ferocious, afraid that others would not know that they were gangsters. They stood at the entrance of the zoo, which really scared many tourists to take a detour. But it's okay to scare ordinary people. The zoo is a state-owned unit. If it was scared by a few little ruffians, it would be a joke. They did this, but alarmed the zoo security department. Old Dong brought a few young security guards and stopped them at the door and didn't let them in. Old Dong can be the head of the security department, so he naturally has some strong connections, at least they are people of the same level as Jojin. Of course, he doesn't buy the bald man's account. Finally, Jojin called and asked for Su Ming's mobile phone number. Mr. Zhou, let me be frank. If you have something to say, just talk about it. Don't mess around. This little Su is someone our Director Values Section Chief Dong said calmly on the phone. Don't worry, Section Chief Dong. I just have some business matters to talk to him about. He raises fish, so we can cooperate. Jojin's voice on the other end of the phone didn't sound wrong at all, as if he really had a cooperative project with Su Ming. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 67. That afternoon, while Su Ming was feeding the wolf cub in the wolf house, the phone rang. During this time, the little wolf was fed by Su Ming and became strong. He ran around in the wolf house all day and was very naughty. When Su Ming took out a black box, the little wolf thought it was a new milk bottle and whined. He crawled towards him, reaching out his claws to grab Su Ming's cell phone. Let's play by ourselves. Su Ming tapped his finger on the little wolf's forehead. He often played this kind of game with the little wolf recently. When he touched it, the little wolf leaned back straight and fell down like a corpse, pretending to be dead. A strange middle-aged man's voice came from the other end of the phone, announcing his home address and mentioning the theft of fish fry from Huading Reservoir. Mr. Zhou, I don't understand what you are saying. Your fry is gone. What does it have to do with me? Whether it's none of your business or not, you know it in your heart, and I know it too, Jojin said. Now that Su Ming had done it, he had already expected that Jojin would guess him sooner or later. Fish farming in Shuahun Lake was not a secret and it was impossible to hide it. He was not surprised when he received Jojin's call and said calmly, if I remember correctly, you seem to have said something, and now I return the exact words. You support yours and I support mine. We have nothing to do with each other. There is no evidence, but you know it in your heart, and it doesn't matter. If you just say it clearly in your heart, you can convict someone, and the law will take a toll. Therefore, in the absence of evidence, Su Ming was not worried about what Jojin could do to him. The location of the underwater passage is very secretive, and it is a long way from the fish fry enclosure. It is basically impossible to find the entrances. What's more, Su Ming also arranged for shrimp soldiers and crab generals to patrol both sides of the passage. Even if he was really unlucky and was discovered by Jojin, Su Ming could seal the passage at any time, and there would be no proof. Su Ming's death had nothing to do with him. Jojin was not surprised. He had expected that Su Ming would not admit it and sneered, young man, you think you have no evidence. You hide in the zoo every day, so I will take it from you. Is there a solution? I advise you to be clear-minded and don't think that everything will be safe if the zoo is protecting you. Boss Joe, are you threatening me? Su Ming grinned. Threatening? No, 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 I am a law-abiding businessman. How could I threaten you? Neither party is stupid. Recording equipment is so common these days. Both of them ignored each other and refused to leave any clues on the phone. Jojin laughed and said, I have a way to cooperate. If you agree, it's good for both of us. As for the fry, I'm too lazy to pursue it. I can still afford the loss of millions. Maybe we can still be friends in the future. Cooperate. Su-ming pondered for a moment, what could he and Jojin do to cooperate? Is it also beneficial to both parties? He thought for a while, and suddenly understood what Jojin meant, and asked, you mean, after the fish grows up, I will sell it to you directly? Smart man. No wonder Baldhead and the others suffered at your hands, Jojin admitted. After hearing what Jojin said, Su-ming's mind suddenly changed and he realized that this was not impossible. Firstly, he and Jojin don't actually have any deep hatred. Business is business. If he can make money, it's not necessarily a problem. Secondly, he has just entered the breeding industry and has no way to sell it. If Jojin can collect these fish, even if the price is lower either way, you don't have to pay a penny for the fry or feed anyway. What's the price? Su-ming asked. 20% of the market price, Jojin said. Su-ming's face darkened slightly. Mr. Zhou, is this how you make friends? The market price is 20%, which means that Su-ming's hard work will end up helping Jojin, and he still has to pay for it. Jojin made a good calculation. If he bought it at this price, it would be more cost-effective than raising fish himself. Jojin sneered on the other end of the phone, don't forget, the fry I lost are much more than those in your lake. If you don't agree, I guarantee you won't make even a dime. Then there's no need to say anything. Su-ming hung up the phone directly. On the other end of the phone, a blind beep came from Jojin's cell phone. The bald man was observing the words and expressions on the side. He guessed something from Jojin's expression and said, Brother Joe, since that kid doesn't know how to look, you can't blame us. I took a few people to climb over the wall in the middle of the night and give him the inside of the lake, give him some medicine, and I'll make sure that within 3 days, all the fish in his lake will be dead. This is an old trick of Jojin and his gang. In the past, there were some sporadic fish farmers near the reservoir. Jojin would not beat or scold, but would secretly send bald men to drug the other party's fish pond and poison all the other party's fish. Ordinary farmers simply cannot afford such huge losses, and their business will be out of business immediately. In the past few years, through this method, Huading Reservoir and all nearby fish farmers have been annexed by Jojin, creating a situation where Huading Fishery Company is the only one. Unexpectedly, Jojin shook his head. No, Shuahuan Lake is the property of the zoo after all. Poisoning is a serious crime, and the police must investigate thoroughly. Then let that kid go like this, the bald man said, unconvinced. Brother Joe, I'll take him to the entrance of the zoo and wait there. I don't believe he will never leave the zoo. I have been engaged in breeding for so many years. Of course I have a way to make him eat Coptis chinensis and make him unable to tell the story of his suffering. Come up with me. Jojin took the bald man and a few younger brothers to the second floor of the villa and walked into his bedroom. In the center of Nyoda's bedroom, there was a huge aquarium that was 4 to 5 meters long and looked like a big coffin. In the glass box, there were 7 or 8 strange fish with slender bodies that looked like eels swimming slowly. But compared with the eel, these strange fish are much larger than the eel. The longest one is almost 1 meter long and as thick as an adult's arm. It is covered with diamond-shaped scales like armor and has a long mouth like a water bird. At first glance, these strange fish are more like crocodiles without feet. Next to the large aquarium box, there is a smaller aquarium with more than a dozen koi swimming around. Jojin used a small fish net to catch a koi that was more than half a foot long and threw it into the large aquarium. As soon as the koi fell into the water, a strange fish rushed over like an arrow. Its long mouth was full of inverted fangs and bit the koi. The koi had no time to struggle. Several other strange fish also rushed over and tore it apart. In just a blink of an eye, the huge koi, which weighed at least 2 kilograms, was torn into pieces and eaten by several strange fish. Not even a trace of it was left, as if it had never existed. Only light red blood was left floating in the water. The scene was extremely bloody. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 68. As soon as the big koi fell into the water, it was immediately torn apart and eaten by several strange fish. The bald man and a few gangsters looked at it in shock. "Oh my God, this fish is so fierce. Brother Joe, this is food mermaid. This is not a piranha, but it's worse than a piranha." Joe Jin took a towel and wiped his hands while saying, "This is the crocodile gar, one of the most ferocious freshwater fish. A friend of mine brought it from South America. This thing looks like a crocodile, but it is actually more ferocious than a crocodile, only eat meat, and are poisonous. I heard that the largest one can grow 5 or 6 meters long. If there is one of these things in a fish pond, Oh, I understand. Brother Joe, what you mean is to secretly put these crocodile gars into Shuahun Lake and eat all the fry." The bald man gave his thumbs up. "Tall. Brother Joe, you are really tall." "Humph, didn't that kid say, everyone raises his own? Okay, I'll let him raise it. I want to see what he can raise with these things. Don't talk about fish, just crabs. All the loaches must be killed." Joe Jin threw the towel fiercely. There was a gangster nearby who was unsure and said, "Brother Joe, are these crocodile gars ferocious or not? But there are only a few of them, and his lake has an area of more than 100 acres. Even if they kill these crocodile gars, they won't be able to survive. I can't finish that much fish." "You don't understand," Joe Jin sneered and shook his head. "There are many fish that eat fish and even people. Why is the crocodile gar notorious? Because this thing has a bad temper and likes to kill indiscriminately. No matter whether it can eat it or not, it will bite. There's a saying for killing other fish around you. Besides, it's not just 2 days in one day. The days are long. If you eat dozens of fish today and dozens tomorrow, by the time that kid reacts, there won't be many fish left in the lake." The bald man geared up and said, "Brother Joe, don't worry, leave this matter to me. I will climb over the wall and go in tonight and release these fish into Shuahun Lake." Around 10 o'clock in the evening, Su Ming met a patrolling security guard who said that Section Chief Dong was looking for him during the day. Su Ming had nothing to do, so he wandered to the security department. As soon as you entered the gate, you saw a wall with dozens of TVs showing surveillance footage from various parts of the zoo. "Chief Dong, you have replaced a shotgun with a cannon." Su Ming smiled and said hello to Lao Dong, who was sitting in front of the monitoring desk. "The last time I came to the monitoring room, less than 1/3 of the dozens of TVs had pictures, and they were very unclear. Most of the monitoring equipment was broken. It's not all your fault. Last time, money was approved because of the lucky cat. You donated another 100,000 yuan, so that the hospital had the money to strengthen security and overhaul all the surveillance cameras. The equipment that should be installed should be replaced. Change it? No, the project was just completed today." As Section Chief Dong said this, he motioned to a young security guard in the security room to move a chair over. "Brother Su, please take a seat," the security guard said politely. "Thank you." Su Ming nodded to the security guard, and then joked to Section Chief Dong, "Then every move we make is under your nose, Section Chief Dong. You kid don't say something directly, you go around the bush and scold me, right?" Section Chief Dong laughed, and then said, "I understand, isn't it about privacy? The old principal said that all our employees' residences are private. The key to necessary monitoring is the surrounding walls and the animal area. Are you trying to take the little girl back to Shuaxi Hushanhu?" "I would like to, but it's a pity that no little girl is willing." Su Ming smiled. "That's not true. I heard that the 3 little girls at the nurse's office have been talking about you behind your back all day long. Maybe they are interested in you. Su Ming's scalp went crazy when he talked about the nurse's office. After the last wolf dog incident, he was too embarrassed to speak when he saw the nurse sisters several times. As for Nurse Xiaohu, she was still very carefree. As for Nurse Xiaohu, Su Ming really couldn't muster the courage to take her back to Shuixi. Let me ask you one more question. How come you have provoked someone like Zhou Jin? Section Chief Dong turned his eyes away from the surveillance camera, glanced at Su Ming, and asked with some concern, is there a business conflict? Zhou Jin is not a good person. If there is anyone who needs help, I will go and talk to him. He lost his own fish, so I must have stolen it, Su Ming said. Are you kidding? His fish farms in Shuihun Lake and Huading Reservoir are several kilometers apart. How can he steal it? Just dig a hole in the ground. He is used to being overbearing. When he sees that you are raising fish well, he wants to blackmail you. It's not like this has never happened before. He forced several s nearby to move out, so you don't have to pay attention to him. If anything happens, the garden will help you. Section Chief Dong's unintentional words almost guessed the truth, and Su Ming smiled and said nothing more. After chatting for a few more words, Su Ming was ready to leave. Before he could go out, a figure suddenly appeared on a surveillance screen. The man's clothes were in tatters, and he climbed up the zoo wall and jumped out of the park. Immediately afterwards, the wolf dog brothers appeared on the screen. There was no sound in the screen, and it could be seen that the 2 wolf dogs were barking in the direction of the man climbing over the wall. Some time ago, the fence of Monkey Mountain was secretly destroyed. As soon as he saw the picture on the surveillance camera, Section Chief Dong's heart suddenly lifted. He immediately picked up the walkie-talkie and said, Xiao, go to the east back wall and take a look, someone just climbed over the wall and was driven away by Su Ming's wolf dog. I'll go take a look too, Su Ming said. When a group of people arrived, the man who climbed over the wall had already run away, and the wolf dog brothers were still guarding under the wall. He would definitely not be able to catch up now, so Section Chief Dong could only ask a few security guards to be more careful when patrolling at night. Then I'll leave first. Section Chief Dong, you guys are busy. Seeing that he had nothing to do, Su Ming turned around and left with the wolf dog, heading towards Shuihun Lake. Since he is raising fish, Su Ming must of course prevent anyone from sabotaging or stealing fish. During this period, Su Ming spent most of his time at the Shuihun Lake, especially after receiving a call from Zhou Jinatong. After the threatening call, Su Ming specially sent a few cats over and ordered the snapping turtles and big-headed catfish to step up their defenses. He even sent Ergoza to the back mountain and mobilized a group of bees and wasps to hide in the trees around Shuihun Lake. There are those who fly in the sky, those who run on the ground, and those who swim in the water. They are all his men. They are deployed in all directions by sea, land, and air. Even if Zhou Jin has great abilities, he can't do anything about Shuihun Lake. The guy who climbed over the wall must have been to Shuihun Lake before he was chased by the wolf dog brothers. Under the moonlight, the bald man ran wildly along the path beside the reservoir. As he ran, he looked back hastily for fear of being pursued. After finally reaching Zhou Jin's small villa, the bald man was finally relieved and shouted at a younger brother, "Water, water, water, give me a glass of water." At the same time, outside the villa, Ergoza, who had been following quietly, was stopping on a branch. His 2 pairs of compound eyes looked at the bald man indifferently as he entered the villa. Then his wings trembled, and he turned around and flew back in the direction of the zoo. "How are things going?" Zhou Jin hurried downstairs. The bald man drank most of the water in the teapot, wiped his mouth, and said incoherently, Yeah, it's done." "Has anyone seen you? Has anyone caught up with you?" Zhou Jin asked. "No, I'm wearing a mask. I checked along the way and there's no tail behind me. That's good. Jojin's eyes suddenly narrowed slightly and he stared at the bald man's embarrassment strangely. How did you do this? Hearing Jojin's question, the bald man couldn't help but cry. He complained with a sad face, Brother Joe, I'm suffering. I almost lost my life in order to do this. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 69. Although the bald man is just a gangster, when it comes to Bald Brother on Yangchuan Road, there is also a person with this title. He may not dare to commit murder and arson, but he will never show mercy when fighting. It stands to reason that such a person can barely be classified as a ruthless person. Even if he is beaten, he will not shed tears. But at this time, the bald man was crying quite miserably, as if he was a wronged little daughter-in-law. Why are you selling horse urine? You have something to say. Jojin glared at him impatiently, pointed at the big bags above his head, and asked curiously, Hey, I said, have you been stung by a wasp again? The boys around him immediately thought of the scene last time when their bald head was stung by a wasp and became incontinent. They couldn't help but tilt their mouths, almost laughing. You're laughing. Listen to what he said, Jojin said angrily. The bald man shed tears and recounted what happened tonight. After dark, he put 7 crocodile gars, the smallest of which was half a meter long, in a large snakeskin bag, climbed over the wall and entered the zoo. When he sneaked to the edge of Shuahun Lake, Baldhead was quite proud. Not only did he not have to bear the responsibility for the loss of the fry this time, he could also use this opportunity to take revenge on Su Ming. In fact, in the final analysis, he and Su Ming had no big hatred. From a rational point of view, Baldhead also understood that the wasp sting that time was probably an accident and had nothing to do with Su Ming. But people are afraid of getting into trouble. The more the bald man thinks about what happened in the past, the more he hates Su Ming. The more Jojin suppresses him from dealing with Su Ming, the stronger his thoughts of revenge become, taking root and sprouting in his heart like a seed. Continues to grow. Now, with these crocodile gars, all the fish in the lake will not be able to survive, and the boy will definitely lose a lot of money. Alligator gar don't only eat fish. If you eat several such big gars together, it won't be a problem to kill someone. If you hurt a tourist, you will definitely have to bear the responsibility. At that time, not only will Shuahun Lake not be able to contract, but they may also be fired. Temporary workers are just used to take the blame. Once Su Ming is fired and loses the protection of the zoo, he becomes a boy from out of town. His bald brother can take revenge as he pleases. He can flatten or round him with just a word. Watching several crocodile gars in the snakeskin bag slide into the lake one by one, and then quickly disappear into the lake, the bald man couldn't help but get excited, as if he saw Su Ming screaming for mercy under his steel pipe in the future. Scene. I'm going to break your third leg too. Oh, what the hell? The bald man was immersed in the violent sexual intercourse in the future. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain like a needle pricking his head. He subconsciously slapped the bald man on the forehead. With a snap, the shot was empty, but there was an unforgettable buzzing sound in my ears. I'm going, it's this thing again. Hearing this voice, the bald man was so scared that he didn't have a heart attack. He stepped back several steps and quickly wrapped his head tightly with a wet snakeskin bag. Only 2 eyes were exposed, looking around warily. Fortunately, there were only 1 or 2 wasps surrounding him. The bald man waved wildly and finally drove the wasps away. Although the wasp ran away, the big bump on his head still hurt a lot. The wasp seemed to be very poisonous. Within half a minute, the bald man felt dizzy and his chest felt irritated, as if a big stone was pressing down on him. He held onto the tree and retched a few times, but nothing came out except saliva. When he looked up, he saw several cats squatting on the grass in a dark corner not far away, looking at him coldly. The lakeside was quiet and peaceful, and the faint moonlight shone on the lake, rippling like jade-like ripples. With such a beautiful scenery, the bald man couldn't help but feel a thump in his heart, and said a literate sentence. "It's not a good place to stay for a long time." Thinking of this, he hurriedly turned around and ran away the way he came. Fortunately, he didn't encounter any patrolling security guards along the way. It went quite smoothly. He walked for a while in the dark forest, and when he left the forest, he was about to reach the wall. At this moment, the bald man suddenly felt something was wrong. There was a slight rustling of footsteps behind him, as if something was following him. He was covered in cold sweat and slowly looked back. Not far behind him, two large wolf dogs that looked like calves slowly walked out. They opened their big dark eyes and tilted their heads, looking at him strangely. "Hey, Big Black and Two Black. It's you." The bald head recognized these two dogs at a glance. They were the same two dogs they had raised to watch the fish pond bite people. He rolled his eyes and thought that Jojin had been dissatisfied with him recently. If he could not only successfully complete the task this time, but also bring back two stolen wolf dogs, Jojin's impression of him might be improved. It seemed that these two dogs had been following him, but they did not pounce on him directly, which meant that Dahe and Erhe still knew him. The bald man looked around furtively. Seeing that there was no one else, he whistled at the two wolf dogs and whispered, "Big Hay and Erhe, follow me." When the two wolf dogs heard the whistle, they tilted their heads, as if they remembered something, and their eyes became even more confused. Come on, Dahe, Erhe." The bald boy was afraid that he would have a long night and have many dreams, so he was discovered by the patrolling security guards. He was about to walk towards the two dogs and wanted to lead them. He had just taken 2 steps furtively when the expression of the wolf dog brother suddenly changed. He lowered his body and looked in his eyes. He also became fierce, and opened his mouth slightly at the bald man, revealing 2 rows of white fangs, and let out a low growl. "Woo, woof." Wonke finally roared for the first time, and the shout immediately spread far away. In the woods in the distance, 2 flashlights flashed. Someone heard the sound and came over here. The bald man turned around and ran away without even thinking. In his panic, he forgot the most common sense: when you encounter a dog on a narrow road, you must not run away. The 2 wolf dogs were still thinking about burning incense, but his escape only angered the wolf dog brothers, who chased him from behind like lightning. Ouch, 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 ouch. They were huddled together in the darkness, and they didn't know whether it was a person or a dog barking. Fortunately, these 2 dogs had been trained by Su Ming so that they did not injure anyone and did not bite anyone's vitals. They also knew the bald man to some extent and could show mercy. Otherwise, the 2 big wolf dogs would have killed the bald man alive. Even so, in just a few seconds, the bald man's buttocks and legs were severely bitten by the wolf dog several times. The pain was heartbreaking, and a large section of his trouser leg was torn off. The flashlight light in the distance was getting closer and closer, and the rustling footsteps could be heard. The bald man gritted his teeth to hold back the pain. At the critical moment, he showed his amazing potential. He fought hard and finally got rid of the entanglement of the 2 wolf dogs. Rolled and climbed out of the back wall, jumped up to the top of the wall with a few kicks, crossed his legs, and sat on the wall. There were broken pieces of glass stuck everywhere on the wall. When the bald man straddled the wall, he screamed, "Oh my God!" His buttocks were in severe pain. His hands holding the wall were pricked with blood, and his whole body was suddenly stabbed. His own weight was nailed to the wall. Not to mention the soreness of being stabbed in the butt by dozens of pieces of broken glass, the muscles in the bald man's mouth and face were twitching, and the slightest movement would cause excruciating pain. Who? The security guard finally emerged from the forest and flashed his flashlight toward the wall. The bald man hurriedly covered his face. He couldn't care less at this time and fell out of the zoo on his legs. Click, 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 there were a few soft and crisp sounds, and a large piece of glass on the wall suddenly disappeared, and it was all stuck on the bald butt. "Brother Joe, I risk my life to help you, oh, please be gentle." The bald man was lying on the sofa, sobbing and telling the story. A boy was using tweezers to pick out the glass particles on his butt one by one. The other boys couldn't help it anymore, covering their mouths and laughing wildly. "It's a wasp again. Can this guy really know how to train a wasp?" After hearing what the bald man said, even Jojin was a little confused. "It's not impossible, beekeepers can take advantage of the bees' habits and simply command the bees." One boy suppressed his laughter, coughed twice, and said, "Brother Joe, let me send my bald brother to get an injection first. It will be bad if he gets rabies." Jojin looked at the bald man with disgust and waved his hand, "Send him to the hospital. You guys, follow me to the edge of the fish pond to guard. This batch of new fry must not cause any problems again." Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 70. While the bald man was lamenting his tragic experience, a life-and-death battle was going on in the lake. On the calm water surface, the waves splashed, as if there were some monsters fighting under the water. Su Ming sat in a speedboat, staring at the water surface intently. The two wolfhounds put their front paws on the edge of the speedboat, staring at the water surface with their tongues stretched out, and occasionally roared as if in protest. The wolfhounds are excellent in water and have extraordinary combat power, but they can't intervene in the battle between aquatic creatures. Not long after several ferocious alligator gar were put into the lake, the big-head catfish guarding the lake discovered their traces. Alligator gar are natural killers, and the big-head catfish is not their opponent at all. They dare not fight directly, and even if they rush up, they can only give up. In a hurry, the big head can only take the nearby fish away to minimize the loss. When Su Ming arrived, in less than 20 minutes, the 7 alligator gar had killed dozens of various fish and shrimps. Su Ming immediately recognized this ferocious creature known as the freshwater destroyer and released a burst of mental power. The alligator gar is indeed one of the 10 most ferocious freshwater fish. It has a strong resistance to mental power. It is violent and fierce and difficult to tame. Once it comes into contact with mental power, it is slippery and uncontrollable, struggling to escape. With Su Ming's current mental power, it is not completely impossible to deal with it, but the lake is too large and the alligator gar is very cunning. It is not easy to accurately lock them. Even if it can be locked, the alligator gar will not succumb in a short time. Su Ming hurriedly took a big sip of big blue honey, replenished his mental power, controlled the fish school, and attracted the alligator gar to the center of the lake. In a section of waterway, dozens of half-grown fish fry used as bait were sacrificed. Jojin, I will make sure you have no harvest every year," Su Ming gritted his teeth. At this time, in the lake water below the boat, a huge whirlpool composed of thousands of various fish appeared. At the center of the vortex, there are 7 alligator gars gathered together. Layers of half-grown fish fry, connected head to tail, swim quickly around the alligator gar like a school of fish migrating in the sea. The outermost layer is the weakest crucian carp. These crucian carps, which are no bigger than a palm, have almost no fighting power, so they are placed on the outermost protection. Their main mission is to drive the vortex and ensure the integrity of the formation. Fish are swarming, and with the crucian carps constantly spinning, the vortex formation will not be disrupted. The relatively fat big-head carps are the backbone of the vortex. They are much larger than crucian carps. Under the full impact in the water, their strength should not be underestimated. Like a city wall, they protect the weak crucian carps and other small fish. From time to time, there are long and flat silver carps with extremely fast swimming speed, like small blades, interspersed in the vortex, disturbing the alligator gar. The 7 alligator gars seem to be surrounded by a large iron barrel. The water flow brought by the vortex of the fish school made them sway a little. However, their fierce nature was completely aroused at this time. The alligator gars rushed to the fish school formation frantically. Every time they charged, they would tear a hole in the vortex of the fish school. Fortunately, there are many fry in the lake. Every time a batch is sacrificed, another batch will be replaced. The silver carp surrounded them in layers for several circles. The defense is unbelievably thick. The impact force brought by their own swimming is also very large. The charge of the alligator gar is like hitting the slippery butter heavily. 50% of the 100% strength is offset by the power of the vortex. The main purpose of the fish vortex is to prevent the alligator gar from escaping. The only one who is really qualified to fight the alligator gar is the black carp. As a carnivorous fish, although the black carp is not as notorious as the alligator gar, it is not comparable to ordinary freshwater fish. They are full of muscles, strong, with sharp teeth in their mouths, and slightly toxic. If the alligator gar is a special soldier among fish, then the blackfish is at least at the level of armed militia. Relying on the advantage of numbers, under the unified dispatch and command of Su Ming, large groups of blackfish drilled into the middle of the whirlpool along the mud at the bottom of the lake, and launched a group charge towards the alligator gar from below without fear of death. Not only the blackfish, the bottom of the lake at this time is simply a sword forest, with dense crabs and lobsters, raising their big claws and small claws and rushing upwards. Once the alligator gar swims a little lower and wants to rest and recover its strength, it will be immediately clamped and bruised. The number of black carp and grass carp is relatively small, but they also join the battle. The size and impact force of grass carp are larger than that of bighead carp. A 5-jing grass carp can knock an adult unconscious with a full-strength collision in the water. Wherever there is a weak spot in the vortex, a big grass carp will immediately fill it up. If the alligator gar is not careful, it will be knocked away. The black carp is an omnivorous fish, and it loves to eat snails the most. It has a nickname called screw bastard. Although its teeth have long been degenerated, its suction power is amazing. It can rely on its fleshy lips to suck the snail meat out of the shell. Under the water surface where the black carp are raised, there is often a thick layer of empty snail shells. The black carps opened their mouths and stuck to the alligator gar tightly, slowing down the speed of the alligator gar, which was originally as fast as lightning. Su Ming's side continued to suffer casualties, and with it, the alligator gar's physical strength was rapidly consumed. Gradually, the originally insignificant vortex water fluctuations also had a significant impact on the battle situation. As one thing grew stronger, the other weaker. The fish swarmed faster and faster, and even a vortex appeared on the water surface. The alligator gar in the water began to stagger. Fish in the water is like a person on the shore. If a person can't even walk steadily on the shore, it can only mean that his physical strength has been consumed to the extreme. Now, the vortex suddenly opened a big mouth automatically, and a hideous alligator turtle, shaking its head, slowly entered the battlefield from the crack. The alligator turtle is far superior to the alligator gar in both offense and defense. There is no suspense in single combat, but if it is normal, if it encounters 7 alligator gar, the alligator turtle can only escape. But at this time, the alligator gar has reached the end of its strength, and the arrival of the alligator turtle is the last straw that overwhelms the alligator gar. The alligator turtle was ferocious, chasing the alligator gars around aimlessly. Alligator gars kept hitting the whirlpool's wall, and then were pushed back by the strong impact force, and then were chased again and hit the whirlpool again. Seeing that the time was ripe, Su Ming licked a big mouthful of honey and poured his mental power into the 7 alligator gars without reservation. The alligator gars, which were almost exhausted, finally couldn't resist the erosion of mental power and gave up resistance. The water surface gradually returned to calm. After a big battle, nearly 300 fish, fairy shrimps, crabs, and the like under swimming were killed, mainly crayfish. This kind of guy with a shell is actually very fragile. A large number of them died when they were hit by the long body of the alligator gar. Compared with the total number of fish fry in the entire Shuahun Lake, this casualty can be ignored, but if Su Ming had not discovered it in time and used his mental power to command the battle, as long as these crocodile gar were given enough time, they could kill all the fish and shrimp in the lake. All 7 crocodile gar were caught and brought back to the waterside pavilion. This thing looks like a prehistoric monster, with a slippery body covered with scales, and sharp teeth in its long mouth, which is indescribably weird. After recovering a little strength, the crocodile gar actually showed signs of rebellion again. Give up resistance, abandon darkness, and join light, correct chaos, and turn the tables. This is your only way out. Su Ming sat in the Ting Feng Shui pavilion and sneered.